In this video, we're going to show you how to install the starter on your Kia Sorento located underneath your intake manifold. With the hood open, go ahead and open up your radiator cap. You want to make sure you're doing this when the engine is cool. Never do this when it's hot. Open, remove the cap, and set it aside. Let's go ahead and raise the vehicle, and we're going to drain the coolant. We're going to remove our lower splash shield here. There's going to be a series of 12mm bolts. I want to get loose in and remove these. There would normally be one right in the center section here, but it's missing. There's going to be a few of these plastic retainers. Using our Phillips head screwdriver on our particular model, go ahead and remove that center section. That's going to allow us to get behind the base with our trim tool and pop that out. We're going to do this for the remainder of these. Go ahead and remove that splash shield, set that aside. Note the splash shield removed, on the passenger side lower portion of the radiator, you're going to locate the drain or the petcock here. I'm going to go ahead and reach up and turn this counterclockwise. Now we do have a catch can underneath to catch our coolant. Let's go ahead and let that drain out. Now at this point, we're just at a slow drip here. Let's go ahead and close this up. So turn that clockwise, thread that plug back in. I want to make sure that it's good and tight. I'm going to go ahead and grab a rag and just wipe that down. Now right up above your oil filter, you're going to see this bracket here. Now there's two bolts going through into the intake manifold. And these are two 12mm bolts. We're going to go ahead and use our swivel socket. We want to go ahead and loosen and remove these two bolts. Remove those and set them aside. Go ahead and locate your battery right here on the driver's side front portion of the vehicle. We'll use a 10mm socket, our extension and ratchet, to go ahead and loosen the 10mm nut here. Go ahead and give this a twist. Go ahead and pull that up and off and set it aside. We're going to remove our air intake tube. We have to use our Phillips head screwdriver. And normally what you want to do is unscrew the center. And as this comes up, you can use your trim tool to lift it up. Now ours are slightly damaged, but normally the center will come up and you can get your trim tool underneath, lift up the centerpiece, and then pop out the bottom. Lift this up, pull it towards you, and set that aside. And if your battery has this cover over the positive terminal, you're going to push in on this clip and lift that up to expose the terminal. Use your 10mm socket. Lift up the entire unit here. I'm going to give this a twist. Lift it up and off, and just tuck that aside. Now along the front side of the battery, if you go down, there's going to be a clamp right here. This is a securing clamp here. It's a 12mm bolt, so we're going to use our 12mm socket with an extension. We want to loosen and remove this. Now you can use an impact driver, or you can use your ratchet like I'm doing. I'm going to remove that bolt and the clamp. With that removed, we can now pull the battery out. Now reach in here, slide that battery, and lift that up and out. Now that we have our air intake tube removed, we're going to go ahead and remove the 3 10mm bolts securing the air filter box. 1, 2, and the third one is right back here. Remove those. We're going to remove or loosen the hose clamp holding our air intake tube to the throttle body to 10mm on our particular model. So we're just going to use our 10mm socket and extension. And we're going to loosen that up. Now right up top here, we have a vacuum tube with a clamp on it. You use a pair of pliers. Pinch that, slide it back, break that free and work that off. Work that off. On the back here, there's another hose clamp. Use your pliers. Slide that back. Get a little pinch and a twist, and then pull this off. Go ahead and pull this whole thing up and out. We want to remove our upper radiator hose. Now in our case here, we have a worm clamp here, so we're going to use either an 8mm socket or a flathead screwdriver. Yours might have a regular clamp on it where you're going to use a pair of pliers to go ahead and pinch the two tabs together. And make sure that's loose. I'm going to go to the other end over here at the top of the radiator, and we're going to use our pliers to go ahead and release that clamp. Now there was not a lot of room in here to work, so I'm just using a pair of pliers to go ahead and try and open up that clamp and pull this hose off. So this is the clamp right here, and I just had to get my pliers onto that to open that up, and then I wiggle the hose off. So I'm going to remove this here from our thermostat housing. Go ahead and get this out of the way. Now on this side here, we have our throttle body. We need to go ahead and remove this from our intake. There's going to be 4 10mm bolts. And then there's an electrical connector right here we need to remove. Now there's going to be a pinch tab on each side of it. You're going to pinch those tabs in, wiggle that connector off. Use a 10mm socket to go ahead, loosen and remove these bolts. Going to remove all of these bolts. Then take that throttle body and just twist it off to the side. If you want to, you can use a securing strap or something to hold that up, which is probably what we're going to do. Now on our intake manifold is going to be a series of brackets and sensors attached, and they're all using 10mm bolts here. I'm going to go ahead, loosen and remove these. Now when I remove these, I'm actually going to put the bolts back in the holes for now. Unbolting my map sensor down below. I'm going to pull that right out of the intake. Just gently twist that left and right and pull it out. Put that bolt back in. Now our wiring harness had a retainer clip right here. It is broken. It's supposed to go into this bracket that we're going to loosen and remove next. And you guessed it, throw the bolt back in the intake. Let's redirect up to the top of the intake manifold. We have our injector harness across the top here. 10mm bolts. You might be asking, why are you putting the bolts back in the intake? Well, that way there, we don't get them mixed up with anything else, number one. We know exactly where they go when we swap over the intake. And you don't have to worry about losing them. Now if you go down to the front portion of our intake, there's another bracket with a couple sensor harnesses attached to them. There's another 10mm bolt down there. I'll go ahead and loosen that one. You can see there's a retainer right here going to a bracket on the side of the intake. And put that bolt in the lower portion here. All right, we unbolted that bracket here with those sensors on there. I want to go ahead and use our trim tool. Remove that retainer there. I'm going to come up to the top. I want to pop off our upper cover here. And it's simply held on by rubber grommets. Lift up on both sides. Set that aside. And there's a hose right here that goes to our valve cover. I'm going to go ahead and use our pliers here to go ahead, pinch this clamp, slide that back, and pull this off. And then there's a harness coming up to this sensor right here. Just has a little tab on the back side. You're going to reach down, pinch that tab, and pull that harness off. Now I want to go ahead and unbolt our fuel rail. There are two 12mm bolts. Now along the top, we have our 4 fuel injectors right here. There's 4 electrical connectors. There's just going to be a little spring tab on here. We're going to pinch, and we want to separate these harnesses from the injectors themselves. I'm just using a pair of pliers here just to gently squeeze that tab on there. You want to be careful not to crack the plastic, but gently squeeze, wiggle, and pull up. There it is. Okay. Now what we're doing is just pulling things out of the way. Sensors and wiring harnesses and all that stuff there. Now what we want to do is we need to pull up on our fuel rail here, and we're going to pull it up with the fuel injectors as well. Now what we're going to do is go ahead and spray some spray solvent down around the 4 ports of where the injectors go into. We're going to gently wiggle this up and pull out the injectors with the fuel rail. Go ahead and wiggle these out. Set that up to the side like so. Now I want to go ahead and unbolt our intake manifold. Now there's going to be 2 12mm nuts, one here and one here. Now the 3 other ones are kind of buried. There's one in the dead center of our intake manifold, and it's down a plastic cylinder. And then same thing on the right side and then on the left hand side. I'm going to go ahead and loosen and remove the center nuts here. Now if you have a magnet, it's going to make it nice and easy to get to. If you don't have a magnet, but yet you have some tape, grab some tape. This is just standard painter's tape. Stick it over the end of your socket. Press that socket down onto that nut. Loosen and remove. And that tape creates just enough of a filling inside that socket to carry that out for you. And to switch over to a longer extension on the outer ones. Okay, now that we have all of our hardware out, we have our last two hoses over here we need to disconnect, and then we'll be able to go ahead and pull that intake out. There's this upper hose here. Normally there would be a hose clamp there, but it's missing. So you would just use your pliers to loosen that clamp. I'm gonna use my hose pliers and go ahead and pull this off. We'll be able to slide that off a little bit better once we start pulling the intake off. The lower one, we have a hose clamp we need to get to. Use your pliers. Pinch, slide that clamp down. Slide that one off. Now on the side of the intake, there is an electrical connector right here. Let's go ahead and disconnect this. There's a little spring clip right here. I want to pinch that and wiggle this off. There it is. Now as we pull the intake off, we're going to continue to slide this upper hose off as well. When we pull the intake off, we're going to pull it out and then up. We need to put it down around our dipstick tube. If you want to, go ahead and pull this out. Set that dipstick to the side. It's probably going to make it a little bit easier for you. So pull it back off of the studs. Lift it up and over. Let's go ahead and disconnect our wires from the starter itself or from the starter solenoid. You're going to push down this little spring tab, wiggle that connector free, and underneath this rubber boot, you're going to find a nut right here. Use our 12mm socket on our ratchet. that power wire. Now, using a 14mm socket and our ratchet, we're going to go ahead and loosen and remove the 2 bolts holding our starter. Go ahead and pop that starter out. Go ahead and lower your starter down in. And gonna get those bolts started by hand. Once we got them started, we're gonna go ahead and zip them down. Torque down our bolts to 39 foot-pounds. There we go. Now that we have those torqued, let's go ahead and install our wires. Remove the nut, as well as the lock washer. Almost got it. Here we go. Install that cable end. Install our cable end here, lock washer, nut, I'm going to go ahead and use a 13mm socket on the replacement nut. Snug that down gently. You want to torque down this nut to 7.5 foot-pounds. Be sure to put that rubber boot back over. Put that rubber boot on there. Go ahead and take that wiring harness, line it up. And push that in. Now, before we lower our intake manifold down into place, you do want to make sure that the surface of the cylinder head where you're going to mate your intake manifold to is clean. Make sure that there's no old gasket material on there. Next step is make sure that your intake gaskets are fully seated onto the intake manifold itself. And then we can go ahead and lower this down into position. Now, as you're feeding this down, you want to make sure that your oil dipstick comes up behind the manifold. While you're doing this, you're going to make sure that nothing interferes with the gaskets on your intake. Now at this point what we're doing is you're just inspecting everything, trying to work this into place, make sure that your oil dipstick tube comes up in the hole in the between the two runners here. Then we want to go ahead and get our two studs lined up onto the upper portion of our intake. The other thing you need to pay attention to is these two vacuum ports here, because these are tough to get these hoses on with that intake fully seated. So we have a few different things that we're working around here. We're also watching to make sure that those gaskets are not being blocked or pulled off in any manner. Now I'm reaching down underneath here. We have that bracket that our intake attaches to. So we're making sure that that is lining up. Now that we have our intake lined up with our studs there, we're going to line up our vacuum hoses here. I'm going to give it a little spray of some spray solvent here. Get that lined up and working in. It is. Our intake just dropped into place. Gonna give it a little wiggle. With it pushed in, it feels pretty solid. It's not wobbling. If you feel that intake wobbling around, it means something has gotten between somewhere, causing it not to be fully seated. Just checking all of our wiring harnesses, connectors, all that fun stuff there. I'm going to go ahead and pull my hoses on. Okay. At this point, I'm going to go ahead and get those two nuts started on the two upper studs. Once I get these started, I'm going to go ahead and get the 3 long bolts installed. We'll snug them down and then we'll torque them accordingly. Now the left bolt here, when you go to put this in, you're just going to have to kind of work it around this vacuum hose right here. And I had to grab the intake manifold and just kind of wiggle it up and down a little bit to get that bolt to clear the power steering pump. The other option is you can install the intake with the bolt installed, or you can just kind of work that around like that. I just got that dropped down into place. Okay, let's go ahead and get those bolts started. All right, now that we have all these run down and bottomed out, let's go ahead and snug them and torque them into position. Let's torque down our nuts and bolts to 17.4 foot-pounds. I'm going to start on the upper left nut. I'm going to come down to the lower right bolt. Then I'm going to go over to the lower left bolt. And do the upper right nut. And then we're going to do the center bolt. Let's go ahead and install our oil dipstick. We're going to install our fuel injectors next. And we're just going to inspect and wipe off the O-rings on our injectors. What I'm also going to do is give these a quick spray with some spray solvent, line up the injectors, and pop those into the intake. With the injectors in the intake, let's install our 2 bolts on the top here. Go ahead and snug those down. Once that bottoms out, you're good. Across the top of your intake, we can go ahead and get that strip of brackets here installed, all 3 brackets. Just gently snug those down. Once those are bottomed out, install your injector harnesses. So you line those up, push them down, you can hear them click and engage. Grab your vacuum hose over here, gonna line that up, work that onto the valve cover. I'm just gonna use our pliers to go ahead and move that hose clamp up into position. Let's install our connectors and the bracket right there. I'm going to take our 10mm bolt, feed it through that bracket and into the intake manifold. Once that's snug, we have this harness right here, want to press into that bracket. And then we have this connector right here that goes into the sensor right beside it. Press it up and on, you're going to feel it and hear it engage. Next things we're going to do is install our map sensor, install our harness bracket here, and our harness bracket down below. Key thing here that you want to pay attention to is do not drop anything down the intake manifold. Now if you want to, it's highly recommended to go ahead and just take a rag and stuff it in there like so. In case you accidentally drop one of these bolts and it goes down inside, well, if you can't get that bolt with a magnet, you're going to be pulling that entire intake manifold apart again. So let's prevent that from happening. I'm going to go ahead and get our map sensor lined up. Work that into the intake. Get that bolt started. Now for that map sensor, I'm just going to go ahead and snug it down gently. All right, it's bottomed out. Snug. That's all you got to do. There's that bracket right there. Bottom it out. hair bit more, make it snug. Install our lower bracket. Just gently snug that down. Go ahead and press your little retainer into that bracket. Now, the next thing we want to do is focus on our throttle body. Now, I'm going to go ahead and take some spray solvent, spray it on a rag, and I want to go ahead and clean the surface here. Before we install, also inspect the gasket on our intake. Go ahead and pull out our rag. Inspect that gasket, run your finger around that gasket. You want to make sure that it is raised and above the surface of the plastic. If that gasket is smushed and it feels flush with that intake, you want to go ahead and replace that gasket. Ours feels fine. Lower this down into position. I'm going to grab our 4 bolts. They're all the same length, so you don't have to worry about what position they go into. Go ahead and get these bolts started. And once we get all 4 of them started, we're going to go ahead and snug them down in a crisscross pattern. Now that we have all 4 of our bolts started, let's go ahead and snug them down. Now I'm just taking my deep socket and just running those in. Now that I got them all started, really, you can go ahead and switch over to your power tool if you have one. I'm going to come back to this here with my ratchet. And with that snug, just give it a tiny bit more, just a tiny bit. Reach on down there, grab that electrical connector, line that up, and push it on. You're going to feel it in here. Both sides of that connector engage. Now on the top right above your throttle body, you're going to see the harness right here. Go ahead and line this up. Push that down on, you're going to feel it in here, it click in and engage. On the 2 hoses here on the side of our intake, when we first initially removed the upper hose here, it was missing a clamp. Well, we did not put one over the hose previously, so we're simply going to grab a worm clamp. We unscrewed it. Want to open it up. Going to stretch it on over that hose. And then we'll clamp back up and we'll snug it down. Because when we got it, it was missing. So we do want to go ahead and snug down that worm clamp. Then we have our other clamp on our hose down below here. So we have both of our hoses secured there, harness connected, throttle body all secured and connected, map sensor and harness installed. On the other side over here, we have our knock sensor and our oil pressure switch harness all installed, fuel injection all installed, vacuum hose to the intake torqued properly. Let's go ahead and install our upper radiator hose. Now we have our upper radiator hose on. We're using our pliers to open up that clamp. There it is. And release it. Now when I'm doing this here, right beside the radiator cap here, you can see down inside, so you can see the hose going on. Make sure it's fully seated and that clamp is on there, and it is. So with that side installed, let's go ahead and focus on the other side here. Run this hose over. I'm going to drop it into this upper hose clamp here. Install the unit on our thermostat housing. Position our hose in there, our hose clamp. And we'll go ahead and snug this down. Okay. Clamp secured, hose inside the support clamp here. I'm going to lower our airbox down in a position. And get our intake tube installed onto our throttle body. We have a couple hoses here we need to pop on. One here, and then one over on the front side. I'm going to use my pliers to go ahead and move these clamps. Once I have these two clamps on, I'm going to use my 10mm socket, and we're going to secure our air intake tube clamp down below. You want to just snug down that clamp, give this a little wiggle, make sure it's nice and secured. Let's now install the through bolts that secure our air intake box. Let's go ahead and get our bolts started here. The back one, we're going to reach down along the back corner. Now that we have those started, I'm going to go ahead and snug those down. Once those bottom out, you're pretty much good because there's rubber bushings or dampers that hold that. Go ahead and grab that battery. Lower it down in a position. You want to make sure that your ground terminal is pulled out of the way. Now we want to make sure the battery is slid as far back as possible because there's a retaining bar on the back that locks into the bottom portion of the battery. Let's go ahead and snug that down. And once you feel that bottom out, like pretty much, you want to make sure it's good and snug, but you don't have to make it super tight. But you can definitely tell that that is bottomed out. Go ahead and grab that positive terminal. Install that. Snug down the securing nut here. Once that bottoms out, just give it a little bit more. You do want to make sure it's good and snug. Give this a twist. If the clamp itself is moving, you definitely need to tighten that down a little more. Give it a little wiggle. All right, and our positive terminal is now secured. Close the cap. Install this onto our air filter box. Bring this down. You want to take your buttons here, install the lower portion, and then push down on the center and secure that. You're going to do that for all three. Well, sometimes these plastic buttons, they do break, so you'll have to source some replacements. Install your ground terminal. You want to make sure that that's down as far as it'll go on that post. Go ahead and secure this. And make sure it's good and tight. Give that terminal a wiggle, make sure it's good and secured. All right, from underneath, we're going to install our bolts into our bracket, or through our bracket into the lower portion of our manifold. Snug that down. Once that's snug, you're all set with that. Now we're going to take our splash shield, feed it up underneath the tabs on our bumper. Let's get our bolt started. I'm going to gently snug these down. Across the front portion here, install your plastic push pins. Install your engine cover, lining up the rubber gaskets or the bushings with the studs, and snap that down into position. Now, using a clean funnel, you want to go ahead and put that into the top of your radiator. You want to go ahead and fill this up.
When only the best will do, demand TRQ. The only company that lets you view before you do. TRQ is committed to offering the highest quality aftermarket auto parts that are engineered for peace of mind. Thanks for using and viewing with TRQ.